I'm thinking of like the work of a guy called Ceri Evans. He's like a psychiatrist that works with the New Zealand rugby guys. And like, he's the one that to me framed imposter syndrome in a really good way. He says it's almost like three questions that your brain is asking yourself is, what are the demands that are being placed on me? Do I have the ability to meet those demands?
Yep.
And what are the consequences if I don't?
Yep.
So your brain is asking like, so what's expected? Have I got the ability to meet them? And what
Yep.
happens if I can't? And if your brain turns up a blank with any of those things, it immediately starts to panic and makes you feel
Mhm.
dislocated. Whereas what you're describing there is so like you'll go into these environments going, right, I know where everything is, so I understand the demands. And now you can focus on my ability to coach
Yep.
and not worry about the consequences of not knowing where the dressing room is or where the local supermarket is at those lower level events. It reminds me as well of I remember like I was talking about my dad at the start, and one of the times that I was proudest of him was he had a lad boxing at Madison Square Garden in New York. He was headlining, and he was fighting a guy called Miguel Cotto, who ended up being a Hall of Famer, a Puerto Rican boxer, incredible. And the lad that my dad was coaching, that he was a massive underdog, right? And he'd been given the fight. It was like a tune-up fight for this Miguel Cotto. So he was headlining Madison Square Garden, but he was offered enough money that the lad who my dad trained, he was offered money. So his story was interesting that he'd never had his own home. He'd come from a family of like drug abuse and things like that. So this guy was from like quite an underprivileged background. So the money he was offered would allow him to buy his a property for himself. So he took the fight knowing that he was likely to get beat. He was a massive underdog, but he like the outcome for him was going to be success anyway. So we went over to New York, right? And they did everything they could to disrupt us. Like they were doing everything to like it. Cotto was like the huge favorite. There was a huge Puerto Rican community coming in. We were given like the shit dressing room. We were sort of inconvenienced all the way through. And when you go in for like in the dressing room for the big title fights, when you bandage the hand of your fighter, the opposition send in one of their team to come and observe what's going on. And the reason they do it is just to make sure that you're not doing anything illegal or
There's
anything
no
like that.
rocks, no rocks in
No
there.
rocks in it. There's no horseshoes, right? So the Puerto Rican this Puerto Rican coach comes in and my dad's bandaging the hands, and it's about a 20-minute process to do it. It's really quite intimate. And really personalized and specific. So at the end of doing the hand wrap, this Puerto Rican guy kicks off and creates a big fuss, says, not happy with the way that you've done it. I want it done again. So the boxing officials go to my dad, can you do it again? So he does it again. He goes, I don't see why, but yeah, fine, I'll do it again. So he does it a second time. And when he gets to the end of the second time, this guy kicks off again, creates a fuss. I'm not happy with this. And he's sort of making such a fuss. The New York official says to my dad, please, will you do it again? And my dad's like, there's nothing wrong with it. You've all just observed it. This is nothing. And he's only doing it to disrupt and to create a fuss and delay it so he can't do his warm up and things like that. But the New York official goes, just do it again. So my dad does it again, right? And then at the end of the process, he kicks off again, this guy. I'm not happy with this. The fight's off. This is incredible. This is ridiculous. And I saw what was going to happen about a minute before it actually happened, right? Because he was a dad. I saw him push his chair back, and he said to the official, he said, while this guy was shouting, he said, "Who are we listening to here? Are we listening to you, or are we listening to this fella making all the noise?" And just as the official went to say, "No, no, you're listening to me," this Puerto Rican coach starts kicking off and making a fuss, and I could see what was going to happen, and my dad just sort of pushed his chair back. And then he's 70 at this stage. This guy's in his like mid-30s or something like that. But dad just headbutts him, right? Sends him sprawling on the floor. The guy goes sprawling and there's a big fuss. Everyone jumps in before to stop it escalating. And he gets dragged out, the Puerto Rican guy. And it was what he did after it. So I'm not advocating the violence of a headbutt or anything like that, but it was what my dad did afterwards that made me so proud of him. He turned to us all when we were all there in the dressing room, but the boxer in particular. And he said, listen, lads, whatever happens tonight, nobody's going to bully us. And he shifted the mood from anxiety to one where we all went, yeah, you're right. Like, he just brought us back to, this is what we're here to do. We're here, we're just going to be ourselves. We're not going to let anybody bully us. We're going to stand up for ourselves, and we're going to do what's right. And when we were flying home the next day, I asked him about it. I said, what did you do that for? Because he wasn't a violent man. So for him to do that was out of the norm. It wasn't like, it was customary. And what he explained was, he said, on the second time when he was bandaging the hands of the boxer, he felt his hands start to tremble. So he knew that this guy had got into his head. He knew that the plan to try and disrupt him and make him anxious had started to affect him, and he could feel like a slight shaking in his hand. And he knew then it was working. So while he was doing it, he was thinking desperately, how can we stop the momentum going against us here? I need to do something that just reminds us of our ability, rather than worry about the expectations or the consequences of it. I need to just remind us, this is what we stand for, that we can stand on our own 2 feet, we won't be bullied. And to me, that was a really good example of great coaching, because nobody would see that. That's not something that is visible. That was done in the shadows, but it was done at a moment of high pressure, and it changed the narrative. That the narrative in the head of the boxer going out there was, oh, I'm not good enough. These guys are just bullying me. They're pushing me around. They can do whatever they want. And for him, for my dad as a coach, it was, even at Madison Square Garden, like the home of boxing, he was still exactly the same. Of, we stand up for ourselves here. I'm not intimidated, and neither should you be.